Hey, everybody. This is Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot. With me is my co host, Herschell Miller. And I just want to wish everybody a happy new year. Tomorrow, I believe it's tomorrow, is our anniversary, 1 year anniversary of when we launched this program. And well, this is obviously the first show of the new year. Good riddance 2021. And hello 2022. Looking forward to some really exciting things. How the hell are you, Herschel?
Oh, Nevin, I can't complain too much. It's 2021 was a fantastic year in a lot of ways, and it was definitely a reprieve from the horrors that was 2020. So, if we keep with current trends, 2022 should be an absolutely fantastic year from start to finish with nothing bad that's going to happen whatsoever.
There you go. Well, as far as the labor movement and labor victories, 2021 has ended with some pretty good directions for organized labor, which is really nice. So we have that to be thankful for. On the political scene, though, however, it's more a same old. Neoliberals, reactionary conservatives, dominate the store. Corporate America, business as usual. Joe Manchin is the president of the United States, or the new Mitch McConnell of the U.S. Senate. So, what do you have to say about those subjects?
Well, I mean, not to turn this into one of our standard videos, but I would say that as rough as 2021 started off for the labor movement with the unfortunate defeat at Bessemer, it has turned into arguably the greatest moment in 100 years for us because we have seen union elections being filed left, right, and center. The union victories at the Starbucks in Buffalo, New York. We have seen the Kellogg's workers win one of the most unwinnable strikes that I have seen. And I'll be honest with y'all, I was very pessimistic about their odds at the end of it, but they pulled it out with everything that they wanted to get nearly, and they showed corporate America that Americans are serious about the labor movement today. And when it comes to our new glorious dictator, Joe Manchin, I mean, it's what you get when you take a Democratic Congress that has no intention of actually passing progressive legislation and you pin all the blame on a dude that's not up for reelection for another 4 years. Exactly. You get what you get. But there's a wave of populism that is still rising in this country, and I see it every day. And as the holidays have ended and I've had the chance to spend so much time with my family, I've noticed that conservatives around this country are starting to open up to the possibility that there may be something wrong with the Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid being the old way of doing things, the old free marketism, trade with whoever you want, tax cuts are always good mentality. Because when you start to understand that, these people setting high in these corporate offices, they care nothing about you or your country or anything really other than their profit margin, you start to realize that, hey, it really is us against them. So other than the unfortunate loss of the legend herself, Betty White, 2021 ended as good as I possibly could have hoped for. And that is something that I will be very thankful for going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think on that aspect of 2021 was terrific. Regarding Joe Manchin, yes, there were many different things Joe Biden and the Democratic leadership could have done in the Senate to strong arm him and Kristen Sinema, including an open threat of supporting a more populist primary opponent against them in the next Senate races. There could have been a lot of concessions that could have been extracted. But unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that as far as we know, none of that occurred. And that's why, James Burnham, he was a former Trotskyite communist turned old-fashioned conservative and one of the founders of the National Review of Magazines. He said that politics is all about three things: power, power, and power. And for once, the popular masses, populists and civic nationalists, need to exert power, power, and power for the welfare of the nation. Up and for the past 40 plus years in this country's history, in the late 20th and early 21st century, power, power, and power has been exerted by corporate America, often to the detriment of our national survival, our national security, our national sovereignty, and our national prosperity. And that needs to change. And really and truly, the Democratic Party has really not been up to the task. I mean, the Republicans forget it. I mean, Trump was not a true blue populist, one could argue, or at least was hijacked and manipulated by bad actors. But the Democrats really had a shot at really pushing through some legitimate changes as a unified party, but they didn't. And they didn't use the power and the clout and the bully pulpit that both the presidency and the Senate leadership has. So shame on them. You know, there are predictions that the reactionary right-wing Republicans, the labor haters, and probably a bunch of globalists in them will triumph in 2022. You know, as I've talked about on the show with you, in solo monologues, with other guests like Jeff Nyquist and others, Biden is a problematic figure from all points of view. He was never our favorite on the show. He was our least favorite candidate. And really and truly, it's proven the populist left-right, people like Kyle Kulinski and others who've analyzed this, that Joe Biden is really not putting food on the table. He is not another FDR. Bernie promised another FDR, and all of Joe Biden's, you know, minions on the establishment left said, oh, he's going to be another FDR. Well, bullshit on that. I call bullshit on that. But any concluding thoughts regarding my points before we move on to the next topic?
I think you said it well. So, you know, and that's the thing, Nevin. It's kind of going into the next segment here. What's crazy to me is the fact that me and you've been having this conversation for a year now. One of our first episodes was that, you know, the episode titled "We Were Promised FDR" was talking about, and I believe it was late January, early February when we done that episode, and it was talking about the failures at the time of the Biden administration, and this was early into the presidency. And me and you both ended the show with the caveat that Joe Biden had a legitimate chance to make positive moves, albeit not to the extent that I think that we would need, but positive is positive. But here we are, January 1st, 2022, a year after the fact of our first episode, and I'm no more excited for Joe Biden than I was then. Now, I've often said Joe Biden's not the worst president we've ever had, because we've had some doozies, Woodrow Wilson be damned. But at this point, Joe Biden wouldn't be a bad president to have, say, in 1950, early 1960, a president that could have presided over a time of relative wealth and prosperity while doing the bare minimum possible to keep his job. But today, we don't need a bare minimum. We need a leader. And as I look around the landscape of politics, I find that there's very few of them to be found at this point. And the ones that are there, that I believe possess the qualities of leadership we need to lead us out of this current troubling time that we're in, have been ostracized by the corporate media, by the shit-lived center of this country, into the fringes of politics where they don't have any real shot. And it's stacking up to be another situation like Democrats were in 2010, where they have nothing to run on against a motivated Republican base, and they're just going to get shit wrecked. And I would almost be willing to bet money at this point that the Republicans will win back both the House and the Senate. And after that, any hope of any real pro-union, pro-worker legislation is going to go right out the window.
Yeah, well, as I said on many episodes of this show, it's going to take a massive catastrophic crisis that's going to make our views truly palatable in the political mainstream. That's what I think. We're talking 10 cities in every corner. We're talking about a global war. We're basically taking a look at a situation where the failure of the current order is just so obvious that people are going to look for alternative solutions. But I will say not everything is doom and gloom. I think for the purposes of this show, look, it's had its growing pains, but we're moving forward. I can report that our subscribers, in part because of our marketing, also because some of the guests that we have wide audiences and have promoted us because we've provided excellent content on this show, and I think we have a good dynamic here. We have 470 subscribers right now. We're going to be approaching the 500 mark, believe it or not. You know, Herschel, I know you've been involved in some activities. I know you'll want to talk about your year's activities on behalf of this show, on behalf of the cause of populism and civic nationalism. But I mean, I attended the National Conservatism Conference, made some contacts there in organized labor and various populist-oriented conservatives, handed out my cards, made a contact in the Tampa, St. Petersburg area, and a new friend over there of who I recently, when I went to the Tampa, St. Petersburg area, had lunch with him, promoted the show, talked about it with him. You know, so we're snagging some subscribers from the NatCon, or National Conservatism Conference. And next year, I have plans in February to go to the Conservative Political Action Conference, or Committee, CPAC, which is in Orlando, Florida. And also on February 19th, I believe, is a union picnic for my union, the Government Supervisors Association, which is ultimately a subdivision of the AFL-CIO. And I think we have to use these opportunities to promote not only our policies and our vision, but also the show too as well. So one of the goals that I would like to seek is to continue to further increase down here in Florida, South Florida, the marketing of our show. So Herschel, tell us about all the hard work you've been doing on behalf of the show, as well as organizing.
So over the last year, I mean, the page is technically older than the show is, but it's not much older. I think I started the page in June or July of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So, or 2020. So here's the thing. We have been steadily gathering followers because Facebook took the like button away from us because they're stupid. We're right at 450 right now, 455-ish. We're making positive traction along. Got a really good stable of followers on the page, people that I enjoy talking to, Billy Hidbits, Daniel Williamson, David Groth, guys like that. Y'all help keep the show together. I'm so very thankful that y'all have been here. I've been reaching out continually to several organizations around this country. I don't want to name drop some of them right now for the fact, you know, I'd like to get them on board before I start talking about them. But I'll say that we've made a partnership with the American Workers First organization run by Charles Daniels. And again, Charles Daniels, thank you very much, man. You're one of the best guests that we've had on here, and I really consider you a friend. Talking to labor movements up in West Virginia and Kentucky and Eastern Arkansas, and seeing what cooperation can be found. Because even if an organization doesn't have an official partnership with another one, there's still areas of common interest that two people can look at the same time. And you know, meeting people, guests, and other figures. It's been a very productive year, and I feel like that we have spent the last year laying the foundations of the house. Yes, we're still under 1,000 subs and 1,000 followers, so we're far from making it big time. But if you'd have told me a year ago tomorrow that we would be closing in on 500 subs, closing in on 500 followers, I'd have told you were crazy, because there's no way anybody would find me and Nevin that interesting. But
well, you're more interesting than I am, so
don't short
the Toolshed with the 10-gallon hat. So there you go. You're more interesting than me.
But this is the thing, Nevin. It's like I never expected that people would start to really believe in our message. And look, I'm not going to lie to people that say that we have legions of dedicated followers that are willing to go the extra mile for us, but we have people that have sat down and talked to us about issues and tried to discover what ways that this organization wants to help better the country. And I think, Nevin, it kind of leads into a good point, because me and you have both definitely had a political evolution from our time back in January. I don't think it's any small part due to the fact that we've had so many wonderful guests on this show. You know, we've had a populist libertarian, a solidaritist. We've had a a conservative or two along the way. Talking to these people has opened my eyes to the fact that there are so many people out there that care so deeply about helping working class people in this country, that if we could unite, if we could cooperate just long enough, there's no telling how much change could be made in this country. And it makes me very hopeful going forward.
Yeah, and I think to touch upon the guests, you make a really good point. The guests we've had come from very disparate political viewpoints, from people like Charles Daniels, who's nonpartisan, of the American workers' first movement, and you have J.R. Nyquist, who is he's a mixture of he's basically kind of a nationalist conservative, if you will, but with a strong emphasis on national security, which is his most solid background. We have people like Lloyd, your friend, who's more of a populist, independent libertarian. We've had a presidential candidate from a major third party, Brian Carroll of the American Solidarity Party. Who would have thought that we would have had a presidential candidate here? And he was an excellent guest. You have Luis Miguel, who's primarying Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, in the Republican primary. We have Seven Sirac, who is a former member and organizer of Turning Point USA. We might have another ex-conservative guest who was on the Thom Hartmann show as a guest a couple of times years ago. He might be on the show. We're going to be definitely having Charles Daniels again on the show. I already arranged that with him. We just have to nail down a date. We're also going to have Seven Sirac again. We also had some radicals on the show, people like Joshua Neuer, who used to be the head of the American Black Shirts Party, not because we endorse its ideology, but we want to have guests who are radicals and who may have very repugnant views to Herschel and I personally in the show's point of view. But I think it's important because we want to understand why people become members of radical political movements or extremist political movements, to ultimately to try and stop them. That's our goal, is to basically deflate the whole radical agenda. But I think it's important for them to vent and to air their views. In order to fight a political opponent, you have to understand where they're coming from, and you have to steal their thunder without becoming them. So we have a lot of good guests. I have some good guest ideas down the pike. We will have them. Some interesting conferences we'll attend to market the show. And Herschel, I just really want to commend you on what great work you have done on behalf of the show, on the behalf of the cause of unionization and of workers' rights. You have networked yourself with some really interesting individuals that will help us in the long run.
Well, thank you for that, Nevin, and be sure to thank yourself too, because you're. And speak to the audience for a second. The reason, although me and Nevin might have different personalities and backgrounds at times, the reason that I enjoy doing shows with Nevin is because me and him, we come from such different worlds in a lot of respect that Nevin can talk to a group of people that I can't. I am not from a background where I can talk to people that, like industrialists, people high up in the political establishment, people in education, and what that has left me in a position is that I need Nevin, beyond our friendship, to be able to talk to them people that I can't get in a room with. And just like I can go down and talk to my members of the local IWW and people in that ilk, because our backgrounds have left us in a position where we can reach out and network and talk to these people and show them that, hey, a radical civic nationalist and a moderate left populist that can work together and then have had a friendship now for almost 3 years. Anything's possible. And that's the thing. It's like when you're talking about trying to defeat the radicals, like most of the radicals that whether it be Joshua Neuer or whether it be, my friend Jonah or Micah or most radicals I know don't want to be radicals. And look, I can speak that from personal experience. I wish that I could be kind of your standard partisan guy that just, well, I might vote Republican this time because they represent my issues, but next time I might be a Democrat. I wish I could do that. But the world that we live in has forced so many of us to pick a very radical ideology. And I think all of us would really enjoy a country where politics was a whole lot more boring, where everything wasn't an existential crisis and a class war wasn't brewing, and that workers could make ends meet without having to sell their soul and kidneys to get by. And I want to build a world like that. And we want to. This show, the entire organization, is about building a world that our kids would like to grow up in. Because, I have 2 small children and one on the way, and they're going to grow up in a world, and the decisions that I make and my generations and the generations above me make is what's going to affect them the most. And sticking out the olive branch to people the Republican Party and Democratic Party would sneer at is exactly how I believe that we build a real, stable, and functioning country going forward. And it won't make everybody happy. There are ideological differences that I have with the communist and the ideological difference I have with the fascist, the hardcore Republicans. But if there's an amount of cooperation where we can all get in the same room and be like, okay, you might not get everything you want, but we can make it where parents don't go bankrupt because their kids got cancer, or where, maybe we cut the work week down to 30 hours a week or something like that, something that most people can be happy with. That is how we build stuff going forward.
Well, yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think we could follow the path of my favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt. Really, I think would think our favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt, to some degree, Franklin Roosevelt, or former German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. I mean, I think that's the direction we would like to go, at least for the time being. And look, I mean, my political ideology is called radical civic nationalism, not because I want to use the word radical to think I'm some bomb-tossing brown shirt or Bolshevik red guard. No, the purpose is radical departure from the standard neoliberal market fundamentalist order without becoming socialist, essentially. What Herschell and I represent is the true radical, what used to be referred to as the radical center or the vital center, as the phrase was coined by Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who was a prominent New Deal liberal, who served in different democratic presidential administrations during the mid-20th century. So moving forward, yeah, we're going to have to coalition with certain groups, certain individuals that share our vision. And rather than shouting and screaming and shaming the radicals, merely shaming them, I think also, as I mentioned on plenty of shows, we also have to steal their thunder. We have to improve conditions. And frankly, without going into details, because that's not the purpose of this episode, we're going to have to come to the conclusion we're going to need to shift to, let's just say, a very strong state that's going to have to implement these measures. And I will just leave it at that. But yeah, this is also a national security imperative, because if you're concerned about the rise of socialist or communist ideology amongst the youth, even if it's not in an organized fashion, well, Mr. Conservative, Mr. Joe Manchin, Mr. Biden, Mr. Ted Cruz, Mr. Ronald Reagan, and of course deceased, you're going to have to look at yourselves in the mirror, really and truly, because you all are responsible for this. You are responsible for the leftward drift. Because if you took care of the American people and maintained the domestic tranquility as called for in our federal constitution, this wouldn't be happening. You wouldn't have this increasing appeal of extreme left ideologies. You wouldn't have Matthew Heimbach, who was one of the former founders and leaders of the Traditionalist Workers' Party, which was a neo-Nazi group. he wouldn't he wouldn't have a need more than likely to form the group, because when you look at interviews of him, he gives the reason why he moved into National Socialism, and that was because of deindustrialism, lack of investment in Appalachia, and drug addictions and everything else. I mean, you take a look at the Sackler family in a radical civic nationalist government. Let's just say the Sackler family and like-minded folks would not get a slap on the wrist, and I will just leave it at that.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a really important point to talk about, Nevin, is that this is what I would tell an industrialist. You can choose the path where you sacrifice some of your profits. You allow your workers to have better standards of work. You give them more paid time off guaranteed. You go the route that you are going to give some of the money back one way or another, or you can hold on to it and find your house burnt down and your head on the chopping block. Because that's the option. You can the pathway that me and Nevin talk about is one where everybody keeps their head, the country doesn't burn to the ground, and there isn't a state of martial law. The alternative is some communist or national socialist or fascist or Trumpite revolution in this country where lots of people die. And I know that you like your Maseratis and your yachts and your expensive European vacations, but living is also a really good, life choice, and it's generally considered a good thing.
Yes. Yeah, starting by keeping your head intact to the rest of your body.
It's very hard to appreciate Maui, or not Maui, Havana, or one of them places when you're a corpse. In fact, it's scientifically proven to be a difficult process. But that's the thing. It's just like I really, because this show is growing an audience and people are starting to listen. The one thing I would like to tell the audience the most is that don't mistake me and Nevin for some centrist normies that don't understand your radical ideology, because I'm telling you, I have talked to enough communists at this point that I could probably quote Das Kapital. But I want a world where it doesn't have to come to some bloody, violent revolution. I would like to see a situation where all this is resolved peacefully, or at least as peacefully as these situations can be resolved. Because I'm telling you that the monsters that that are out there hiding in these corners of the internet and in their little meetings in the woods are way worse than you could ever imagine. And I know this because I've talked to them and I've been around them, and I know how these people are. And most of them, and this is kind of the scary part about it, is most of them don't see themselves as monsters or these violent revolutionaries. They see themselves as crusaders, almost people looking to solve the problem of the middle and the working class. And that's dangerous, because when you get people that believe that what they're doing is righteous, their capacity for cruelty and violence is never ending. So just keep that in mind, because I've fallen into the trap. I've found myself in several radical circles that I had to pull myself back out of. And I had to pull myself out of them because I realized that these people, that all they're going to do is cause more death and destruction in this country. And that's why I had to learn to open my eyes to the world around me, and I hate to say it like this so bluntly, but to go pick the best ideas from Marx and the best ideas from Mussolini or from FDR, to cherry pick what I thought was the better solutions these people offered. Because, like, look, Nevin said, I love Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, the dude, if I could find a way to resurrect him, I would sell both kidneys and live on dialysis to resurrect the man. I really believe that a dude like that could genuinely fix the problems in this country today. But Teddy Roosevelt wasn't right about everything. There are things about his ideology and there's things about his worldview that you can attribute some of which just to being dated, but I don't think he was a perfect man. Neither do I think Otto Bismarck or any of these great thinkers of our time and great statesmen. So what I said is that why, instead of tying myself into one ideology and becoming a Marxist or a fascist, why don't I just take the best out of them? Because look, I believe that Gentile and Mussolini had good ideas when it came to the economy, the same as Marx did. I think that they had good observations about the failure of liberalism, of democracy, of capitalism, and where these systems tend to fall flat. And you can learn these lessons if you open your mind to them and you go into it with the understanding that, for lack of a better term, don't fall in love with the person, but study the ideology, study the theory behind it, talk to the people that follow it. Because one of the things that I hate is that me and Nevin are seen just as much as radicals to the shit libs in the middle of the country as y'all are. I know what it's like to be put in a little box and kept there, and for people to think that, we're just some radical extremists. So that's why I think I give the respect I do to other ideologies, is because I know that people say a lot of shit online that isn't true, and these stereotypes form. And when you actually talk to people, you'll be amazed what you'll find. And that's probably the biggest lesson I could teach, and the biggest lesson that I learned from 2021.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more on that, on all those points, Herschel. And no leader is perfect. I've learned that through my time as being a Republican activist for certain leaders, Congress, one particular congressman, then a former president, and I learned that there were a lot of deep flaws, not only with them personally, but also they didn't live up to their ideals entirely or fully. They didn't keep their promises. They didn't stick to their principles that they so shrilly and loudly proclaimed. And so I agree, Herschel, never hitch your wagon totally to just one personality. There's a lot I agree with Teddy Roosevelt on. There's some important things I agree with Franklin Roosevelt on, and other things where I virulently disagreed with him. Same thing with Otto von Bismarck. What I liked about Bismarck was how he had an ingenious way to basically steal the thunder of the Marxist Social Democrats and prevent a socialist revolution in Germany from below. There are things I like about Alexander Hamilton, for example. His report on manufacturers is a perfect case in point. George Washington, look at the wisdom in his farewell address and his support, real impetus from George Washington and Treasury Secretary Hamilton to start to build our industrial base in this country. But I will be honest with you, there are political ideologies that I have a lot of contempt for. And while we should understand it, we should also understand that they're poisonous. And when I say radical extremists, I don't always include them. You also have the labor haters, the Bourbon Democrats, which are today's Republican Party, which is a reactionary rightist ideology that preaches that the employers are always right, that workers basically should, if they don't like the job, they shouldn't have any power, that they should just simply go to a new job. And if they get the shit kicked out of them, then, hey, that's freedom, man. Well, I have absolute contempt for that ideology. I've seen it firsthand. It's disgusting. I think the people that propound it that I've come in contact with more often than not are loathsome individuals that lack empathy. And that doesn't square with my personal value system. I mean, that's the bottom line. And these individuals tend to be very hypocritical. They claim they're against socialism, but yet when you talk to them about what trade policy with China, in some cases even trade policy with Cuba, to give examples, they're like, well, we got to trade with them because that'll make them more free and it will liberalize them and make them less hostile to the United States. Well, that's a bunch of bullshit. That's bullshit. They're just a bunch of greedy motherfuckers, and they want to make money when socialism and meets the dollar bills and a fistful of dollars. And that's what it comes down to. Greed is their creed. That's my little rap and rhyme right there. What do you think of that, Herschel? Greed is their creed.
I think it's a good one, and it goes beyond that, Nevin. And this is another life lesson 21 taught me. Excuse me. As much contempt I have as times for the excesses of communism and fascism, I've really started to focus the majority of my hatred on the shit libs and the Ben Shapiro conservatives, because I've realized that them people are so toxic. Like communists, I disagree with them a lot when it comes to the radical redistribution of land, because I believe that there are people across this country that worked hard to get to where they're at, and that there's nothing wrong with somebody taking the initiative to better their life, as long as they don't do it by stepping on other people's throats. But when you get to the Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer race, these people to me are so much worse than the commies, because they, unlike the communists, who I believe have a genuine care for the health and well-being of humanity, at least the ones that are in it for the right reasons, people like that are just in it for the cash and the brunch. And what they have done to this country, and what they, like you were talking about with the trade policy with China and Cuba to liberalize them, has just further escalated the downfall of this country. And they did it for the cash. Like, if a communist revolution happened in this country and everything just went to shit and a half and we ended up in Stalin's Russia, I could have the slight comfort that the people doing it were doing it because they believed they were doing the right thing. They did it for freeing humanity from whatever social construct of the day that they were fighting against. But for the neoliberals, the fact that they sold this country out from underneath us and destroyed everything I ever gave a shit about, and that they did it for cash, it makes it so much worse in my book. And I can't quite put into words just how much that makes me hate them.
Well, it's a battle between, and Ayn Rand talked about it, who's an absolute loathsome, sociopathic, just scumbag of a intellectual. And she talked about this. What we represent, Herschel, is altruism. What the greedsters represent is a soulless form of materialism where there's really no higher principle. Yes, they prattle on about freedom, but the only freedom they really care about is for the corporate classes to make as much money as possible without any real intrusion by any other third parties. And that's what it comes down to. Altruism versus extreme individualistic materialism. And that's going to be one of the ideological battles in the coming decades in this country, both internationally as well as domestically. And my hope is our combination of altruism, individualism, and a sense of community spirit will triumph over the totalitarian elements of the extremists and the left and the NADSOCs, your third positions, on the one hand, and the reactionary right and the corporate globalists on the other, and we include the shit libs in that. You know, Kristen Simmons is a shit lib. She will give her thumbs down with a little curtsy, thinking she's, oh, so cute, and oh my God, I'm so chic, and don't break my nails. Oh, come on now, I gotta go to the salon in the mall, that kind of thing. You know, she don't care about the person starving in the streets, for example, the homeless veteran. She don't care about that anymore. She don't care about the struggling working class Americans, both men and women of all races and nationalities and religions and sexual orientations and all the rest of it. She don't care about it. She just cares about shit lib issues. Her constituents are the corporate America and the upper middle class professionals that have it cushy and secure. They might be working hard, we'll give them that, but they're cushy and they're securing and they're not struggling the same way as somebody working 3 jobs trying to make ends meet and they have 2 kids. That's the constituency of this show. I mean, we're a multi-class we're believers in class solidarity ultimately, but we also recognize there is severe class warfare going on. And as Warren Buffett even admitted, the billionaire investor correctly admitted, his side is winning, our side is losing. My position is we need enforced class solidarity where we cancel the class struggle essentially. And that's going to come about through a strong state. And I will leave it at that.
I will leave you, Nevin, with a quote that probably sums up the reason that I fight against this monster so much. And it comes from a PBS documentary, one of their excellent frontline documentaries. It was talking about the opioid epidemic and how it has swept through this country. Now, I cannot remember the exact company they work for, but I know that there was a massive criminal case filed against them and their founder I think the case ended in either 2014 or 2016. But their head salesman, dude named Alex, he was talking about how he justified grooming doctors to prescribe more pills and to prescribe stronger doses than were recommended by the CDC or the FDA. He said, in this world, the less conscious that you have is the better. That to do what I do, you can't think about the people, the users of these prescription medications. You just have to put it behind you. You just have to think of them as an investment. And that's the monster we're fighting. The people in this country that Warren Buffett belongs to, they view people like us as investments, as assets, but not assets as we would traditionally think, like owning a stock. It's assets in this population of people can work for nothing and make us infinitely richer as long as we give them the bare minimum to survive and keep them fighting each other. That is the class of people. I don't have a problem with people that make an honest living. And there are plenty of examples, I believe, of wealthy individuals who pulled themselves up. I'm not going to say by the bootstraps because I hate that statement, but they did. They worked hard. They used what they had and they made something of themselves. But there is a line to be found. And this is where I cross over into where I cannot cooperate with some people, is because once you lose your humanity, once you lose the ability to see people as people, that is where I believe you cross the line into just being a dick, into being this worthless example of opulence and decadence that this country has been so well known for over the last several years. But if you can keep that, if you can look at your employees as real assets, as things that you should invest in and take care of and nurture and make them their best self, if you care about your customers and you're not rigging FDA laws to overdose people and just brushing it off, then there is a place for you in this organization. And that's the thing. It's like I'm not going to beg and plead for rich folks to become a part of this organization, because I'm not going to talk to them any different than I would any of the other guests we had on. I'm not going to run them off either. So, Nevin, I've got a question for you before we close it up, because I'm going to have to go inside myself. What do you think the biggest lesson that politics taught you in 21 was?
That's an interesting question. The biggest lesson that it taught in 2021, patience. Have patience. The immediate purposes of our show and our movement, have patience. Look what we built in a year's time. 470 subscribers. Look at the guests that we've interviewed, some of whom are actively in politics, political candidates for higher office, labor union officials. Have patience and be persistent and stick to your principles while learning from others, which will help you modify your views without losing sight of what you want to accomplish as a general goal for the United States of America. That's what I've learned.
It's a hell of a lesson. It's a very true one too. Nevin, I have to thank you, man. It's been this last year's taught me a lot, and you've helped me through a lot of it. And I have to really thank you for, helping me do all of this, because this would have been nearly impossible to do by myself. And you've been there every step of the way for all of it. And I cannot thank you enough for that.
Well, I appreciate that, Herschel, but I also have to tell you I couldn't have never done this alone. I think we complement each other well. You have done a tremendous amount, as I mentioned earlier, for our organization, for our program. You're a great friend. You've been there for me on a personal level. I will never forget that. And we make a great team. I think this is not just about merely individual efforts on both of our parts, but it's also, we make a great team. We make a good partnership here. And I look forward to many more endeavors coming down the pike. I'm excited about 2022 on a personal level and on a professional level.
Well, yeah. Well, Nevin, I don't have an alcoholic drink with me, but here's the 2022 with my Lipton brand green tea.
There you go. And I have my invisible alcoholic beverage. So my invisible White Claw, here to 2022. I actually had a White Claw last night. I made myself a nice steak, tostones, beautiful. It was so good. I ate that shit down and it was wonderful. And then today I had, after paddleboarding, did 2.5 hours of paddleboarding, ate myself a nice Mexican dinner, fajitas, chicken and shrimp, ton of vegetables, and then I had this delicious coconut tres leches cake. And I am stuffed, and the scale is showing it, so I pray I lose a few pounds by tomorrow morning, because I get real self-conscious about that shit. Those of you who don't know me, I'm a health nut, and I love the fit lifestyle. So with all my books, I also have a ton of gym equipment at home. Little personal thing about me, which I've shared off and on in different episodes. So healthy mind is also equals sound intellect too as well. Very important. So a healthy body equals a healthy mind, I should say. So, but yeah, we do a great job. We're a great team. We look forward to conquering more, enlightening more people, giving them alternative points of view for 2022. And I'd like to conclude the show, end the show by saying Happy New Year, everybody, to our audience, to our fellow Americans. May this be a safe, healthy, and prosperous year for all our men and women in this country. Big hat tip for our servicemen and servicewomen out there, EMTs, law enforcement, fire department, etc., who put their lives on the line for us. And also, again, just here's wishing to a better year for 2022 for America, for us both personally. And, that's God bless America and God bless our cause.
Amen to that.
Thank you all. Have a great night. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.